Welcome to Dark Realm Horror, where your darkest fears lurk in the shadows. My name is Malcolm Drake, and in the summer of 2011, I decided to vanish into the wilderness for a while. The Porcupine Mountains, tucked away in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, seemed like the perfect escape. A sprawling expanse of thick ancient forests, icy glacial lakes, and trails so secluded that you could walk for hours without seeing another soul. After my divorce and the crushing monotony of a dead-end job, I needed this. Time away from people, away from the noise. But as I parked at the remote trailhead that evening, the air was already unnervingly still. The sun was sinking behind the jagged tree line, and though the light still lingered in the open sky, the dense forest ahead looked like it had already swallowed the day whole. My pack felt heavier than it should, pressing into my shoulders as I stared into the darkness, wondering why my excitement was laced with unease.
The trail to Mirror Lake wound deeper into the forest like a vein through the earth. Every step crunched over fallen leaves and snapped twigs, each sound uncomfortably loud in the muted air. The deeper I went, the more it felt like the forest was pressing in, the trees leaning just a little too close, their trunks thick and gnarled with age. No birdsong, no rustling squirrels. Just a strange, muffled quiet, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. My footsteps slowed, and a thought kept nagging at me. I wasn't supposed to be here. It wasn't fear exactly, but a creeping sense of trespass, like I had crossed into someone else's home without knocking. I told myself it was just isolation playing tricks on my nerves, and pressed on. When I finally reached Mirror Lake, I was struck by its eerie perfection. The water was so still it looked like polished glass, reflecting every jagged tree silhouette with flawless clarity. I pitched my tent just a few yards from the shore and built a modest fire, watching its orange glow ripple across the mirrored surface. For a fleeting moment, I felt at peace, as though the quiet was finally working in my favor. I boiled some instant noodles, poured a generous sip of whiskey, and sat back to watch the firelight dance on the water. The scent of pine and wood smoke wrapped around me, and I almost believed I'd made the right decision coming here. Almost. The peace shattered in an instant. Somewhere far off in the woods, a scream tore through the silence, distant but sharp enough to slice through the night air. My body tensed, flask halfway to my lips. Coyotes, I told myself. But the sound came again, closer now, and there was no mistaking it. It was human. A guttural, ragged cry that carried not just pain, but desperation. My stomach clenched. The fire crackled softly, but its warmth now felt fragile, like a single candle in a vast, cold room. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. Every instinct screamed at me to stay by the fire, but another scream, this one much closer, forced my hand. I grabbed my flashlight and a hunting knife, the latter more for show than any real confidence. The beam cut a narrow tunnel through the blackness, illuminating gnarled roots and slick moss underfoot. My boots sank into damp soil, each step unnervingly loud against the oppressive silence. Even the air felt thicker here, as though I were moving through water instead of wind. About 100 yards in, my beam caught something. A figure crumpled against the base of a tree. He was a mess of torn flannel, ripped jeans, and blood. His chest rose and fell in quick, shallow bursts, each breath rattling weakly. As I stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine, wide with a fear so raw it chilled me to the bone. "Help," he rasped, the word barely a whisper. I knelt beside him, scanning the deep gashes along his arms and torso. Jagged wounds, too wide, too deep, as if carved by massive claws. Then, without warning, his trembling hand shot up, ripping my wrist with shocking strength. His mouth formed a single word.
Run.
A low rumbling sound came from the darkness behind me. My flashlight swept over the trees, catching only branches and mist at first. Then something moved. A shape, huge, hunched, its limbs too long for its body, shifted just beyond the edge of the beam. The silhouette alone was long enough to make my skin crawl. The injured man's grip tightened briefly before going limp. His head lolled, lifeless, and I barely had time to register his death before the thing moved again. I ran. My flashlight swung wildly, its light slicing frantic arcs through the trees as I tore through the undergrowth. Behind me, heavy footfalls crashed through the brush, impossibly fast and relentless. Branches lashed at my face. Roots rose like skeletal hands to trip me, and every heartbeat felt like it might tear through my ribs. The sound of pursuit never faltered, always close enough to taste the panic in my breath. I stumbled into a small clearing, gasping for air. The woods had gone silent again, but my skin prickled with the knowledge that I wasn't alone. My beam swept upward, and there it was. Perched on a thick branch, 10 feet above the ground, its arms dangled like grotesque ropes of sinew, fingers too long to be human. Its head tilted slowly, studying me with cold curiosity. When the light caught its face, I wished it hadn't. Sunken eyes, stretched skin over sharp bone, a mouth too wide filled with jagged teeth. For one heartbeat, we simply stared at each other. Predator and prey locked in some primal stalemate. Then, without a sound, it dropped from the branch, landing with impossible grace. Its head snapped toward me, teeth bared in something between a grin and a snarl. And then it lunged. The last thing I remember was the world tilting, my flashlight tumbling from my hand, and those long, clawed fingers reaching for me through the dark.